Hi, I'm Kelly Lynch, and this is US Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to US Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Today on the show, it's all about California architect John Lautner, a genius of design known for the Chemisphere House, which you might have seen in the Brian De Palma film Body Double, and the Garcia House. That's the one Mel Gibson tore down in Lethal Weapon, among many other thrilling buildings that John Lautner created. I only think Gibson tore down that one.
Right.
Today's guests are two close associates of John Lautner, who died in 1994. His partner and project architect of the stunning Arango House in Acapulco, Helena Arahuete, and modernist master builder Robin Poirier. And now, just back from working out at the gym, it's your host, George Smart.
Hi, folks. Yes, I have been working hard and pumping iron at the gym, working on my abs. I've been going for that Mark Wahlberg six-packs abs look that you see all over Entertainment Tonight.
Yeah.
And it's going great. Thank you very much. I'm up to one ab. Just 5 left to go. Support for US Modernist Radio comes from Realtor Angela Roll.
In a world we are making up, it was a dark and stormy night at the docks of Long Beach, California. Special Agent Angela Roll was on the forward deck of the Queen Mary, just outside the grand dining room, sipping a Stoli Pear Martini to celebrate her birthday. She was recruited by architecture firms, but nothing was exciting her. Suddenly, a woman appeared, a world-famous architect Angela admired, Marcia Folger Decker. Decker was the youngest woman ever awarded the AIA Fellowship for brilliant designs, including the Michael Brady Bridge in Los Angeles and the Theodore Mosby Tower in Chicago. Do you know where I can find parts for a Miele CVA 4066SS? Said Decker. Angela knew that particular model of espresso machine was long discontinued, but within a few minutes, she tracked down one in Italy through fellow members of the Eileen Gray Club, which she had been secretly initiated into just the month before in France, like the Coneheads. Soon, the parts were on the way to a most appreciative Marcia Folger Decker, who immediately offered Angela a job designing the new Santiago Calatrava on time and under budget institute in New York City. Still under construction, I bet.
Yes.
Years later, Angela turned her incredible resourcefulness in architectural training to specialize in modernist houses, advising buyers and sellers on everything from appropriate renovation to specialized coffee equipment. Reach her at angelaroll.com, that's ROEHL, or 919-995-0550.
In every great firm that design houses, or many times other buildings as well, there are at least 2 people that keep the place going and provide constant expertise and problem solving when the master is not around, and sometimes when they are. Born in Belgium and brought up in Buenos Aires, Helena Arahuete graduated from the University of Buenos Aires and worked for several Argentinian architectural, engineering, and construction firms. She came to the United States in 1971 to work for 23 years alongside the famous John Lautner. She was principal on the Arango residence in Acapulco, one of the most stunning houses ever created, and continued the firm after Lautner's death in 1994. Welcome, Helena.
Hello.
Builder Robin Poirier worked closely with John Lautner on construction and restoration of residential and commercial buildings. He's also worked on buildings designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, Richard Neutra, Rudolf Schindler, Finn and Ray Kapp, Paul Williams, Cliff May, Green & Green, and others. Welcome, Robin.
Hi.
So, Helena, it's been 24 years since John Lautner passed away, and he's more famous than ever. Why do you think that is?
Well, it just happens this way, unfortunately, with many artists, painters, and architects in this case, that all of a sudden people start realizing how important his work was after his passing. However, much of it was published during his lifetime, except that mostly other architects recognized him, and he was not as well known by the general public.
How did he come to get public recognition early on?
From, I think, pretty much his earliest buildings. They got published mostly in magazines. And not all were architectural magazines, but some projects, especially, I can highlight the Chemosphere House, Malin House, was published all over the world. And it was completely misunderstood because of the design, which people thought that resembled some sort of a flying saucer, while the intent that John Lautner had was just to solve a basic problem on a very steep, unbuildable lot. That's why he chose to design it this way.
The Chemosphere House, which you should be Googling right now if you're listening to this, does look a little bit like a flying saucer. It's flat and it's on a pedestal on a very steep slope. And it has something called a funicular. Is that right?
That's right.
Oh, yeah. A sideways railway.
Yeah, that takes people from the bottom up to where the house is, because you can't get a car up there.
Oh, definitely not. It's way too steep. There are stairs, of course, but it's quite high to climb to the house just using the stairs. But what I think was the most ingenious idea he had was, because the lot was so unbuildable, rather than using retaining walls, which would have destroyed the site, the most economical solution was to just build one foundation, one footing, with one column, which was hollow, so he could have the electrical and plumbing run through that column. And all the upper section is lightweight. So it was wonderful for earthquake resistance.
As well, it was beautiful and had this amazing view and had this arrangement of the interior, which looked like it was a house completely out of the future.
Definitely.
When was it built?
It was built in 1960. Yes. And then from then on, I mean, a lot of his work was in fact published, but he was not well known enough by the general public, and he never believed in promoting his own work. So he was pretty much, low key in that sense. He did not advertise. He did not socialize particularly with people who could have given him more work or made him more famous. He just cared about the work itself.
He wanted the work to stand on its own.
That's right.
John Lautner is a great name for fans of modernist architecture, but this is new to you. Let's tell you a little bit about the man himself and how he came into our consciousness. He was born in Marquette of academic parents at a local college now called Northern Michigan University. He first attended the University of Michigan, but left soon after. In 1933, he graduated from Northern Michigan University and began a 6-year job with none other than Frank Lloyd Wright in the first class of the Taliesin Fellows at Spring Green, Wisconsin. For Wright, Lautner supervised Falling Water in Pennsylvania, the most famous house in North America, as well as the Johnson Wax Building in Wisconsin. The Lautners moved to California in 1937 for John to oversee the construction of Wright's Sturgis and Oboler houses, and in 1943 he left Wright to work on military projects for the Structon Company. In 1944, he became partner with Douglas Honnold, who was primarily an interior designer, and later parted with him in 1947. Lautner, interestingly enough, did not receive his architectural license until 1952, but by then he was well on the way to becoming one of the most brilliant architects of his generation. Known for his residences, Lautner was well known for the commercial genre named after Googie's Coffee Shop in Los Angeles. Distinctive for expansive glass walls, exciting forms, and exuberant signages oriented to automobiles, Googie became a fixture in 1950s America, but it was regularly ridiculed by other architects. Lautner's reputation suffered despite the fact his designs were innovative and as good as ever. Following some pretty lean years, he rose again in the 1960s with the Chemisphere House in L.A. and other houses we'll talk about, like the Elrod House in Palm Springs. So, Robin, what was it like? You knew John a long time. What were the ups and downs like for him?
His ups and downs? Well, he had, like all businesses, he had, some lean years and some major growth spurt years. His most productive year, I believe, 1949, he had like 7 or 8 jobs going at once. I know that. He had some pretty amazing years where he was extremely busy. There were times when the Lautner office would have jobs in the works but be on hold with the city, and their city was slow in processing plans. So the Goldstein project, being an ongoing project that's still ongoing today, helped the office through some leaner times. I know that.
Let's give people some context around this. So the Sheets Goldstein house, you probably saw in the movie The Big Lebowski, which I think was its major premiere into the film world. It's set up on the Hollywood Hills. It's kind of hard to get to, but once you get down into it, you find this amazing set of cavernous type rooms that work their way down the hill. And James Goldstein, who recently gave the house, was it to LACMA there in Los Angeles?
Yes, LACMA.
LACMA, the Los Angeles Contemporary Museum of Art.
Yes.
Started doing some renovations on the house, and then he bought the house next door, which was also by Lautner, tore it down with his blessing, and built an extension which is part tennis court, part nightclub, right?
Correct.
And the whole complex now, I visited, it's just unbelievable.
There's nothing to compare it to other. The closest thing really is the Winchester Mystery House or San Simeon. The Goldstein House is absolutely in that league.
I heard rumor that Goldstein originally wanted to have like a helicopter pad put in there, but the city wouldn't let him.
Or the neighbors.
Sounds par for the course. Helena would know about that.
No, not really. I never heard about the helicopter pad.
Were you part of the design for the nightclub, Helena?
No, that was after. Actually, the original design there, while John Lautner was still alive, was mostly the tennis court and a tennis house. But then after his passing, it got expanded to the nightclub. And I did not do any work on that. I was working on other projects of my own at the time. I really had no part in that. One other very important project, Robin, is Silvertop, that you should mention because that was really your inspiration.
Well, that was definitely what made me, that drove the final spike in my wanting to work for John Lautner was when I saw Silvertop. But I knew of him earlier from, actually I found out about John Lautner Halloween of 1964 when I trick-or-treated at his house. Actually, it was 63. I grew up 4 doors down the street from the Lautner Harvey house.
Did he have any good candy?
It absolutely blew my mind. You'd never seen anything like it. He had jugglers and magicians, and he had there was, I think, big animals there, like ponies and stuff, outside in the parking lot. Oh, yeah, the candy was incredible. Like you said, they had a housekeeper, like a maid, making hot fudge sundaes at the built-in soda fountain in the house. All stainless steel, just like a commercial soda fountain, like you would see it like a diner. And when I saw that at 10 years old, I thought, oh, wow, this is really something. The Harveys were incredibly wealthy. They were probably the wealthiest people in the neighborhood. And
was this the aluminum people?
This is Harvey Aluminum, correct. And he is quite the man. In fact, I just wrote a little piece for my John Lautner webpage, The Real Thing, on Facebook about him and what an amazing man he was. He's a lot like John Lautner in the respect that he invented such good mousetraps, nobody could reinvent them. He invented aluminum extruding machines that they still use today. So anyways, I'd never seen anything like that house, and I remembered that house. And then years later, I started getting into construction out of high school. I was an apprentice carpenter going to LA Trade Tech when I went to a friend's sister's wedding, and at that wedding I met a girl named Sue Burchell.
This is a lot of detail, Robin. Can you kind of get us to the house?
Anyway, I saw the Silvertop. She took me to see Silvertop.
There we go.
The Burchells had just bought Silvertop, and I saw that, and that set me on my path. Once I saw Silvertop, that was it. I had to work for Mr. Lautner.
Helena, you have a relationship with the Harvey House as well, in that the current owners, Kelly and Mitch, hired you to do a restoration?
Exactly. So I did the restoration, basically demolishing a lot of construction that had been added on, and Robin did the construction there. I would like to mention regarding how well John Lautner was known. He was well known overseas. As a matter of fact, as you mentioned, I had studied in Argentina at the architectural school. We had history classes, history of art and architecture. And of course, we had a whole chapter on Frank Lloyd Wright. And following that, John Lautner's name and some of his work was shown also. So when I arrived in the States and I went to his office, it was really special and unique for me to be able to work for that man.
How did it feel to have him hire you?
Well, it was just a wonderful coincidence because he started this project in Acapulco, which was going to be engineered by Mexican structural engineers, and the drawings had to be both in English and Spanish, and in metric, which of course I was very familiar with. Besides that, he needed someone who would know how to work with architectural concrete, and that was my main expertise during those years that I had to work my way through school. So on these three qualifications, he decided to hire me.
And how soon after were you working on the Arango house? Was it right away?
Oh, yes. He just gave me the schematics to continue work on that. So it was me and also at that time an Italian architect called Andrea Simoncelli. Started working for him. He spoke hardly any English at all, but between the two of us, we worked on the Arango project, which was something fascinating. I mean, I had never seen anything like that or met an architect who had such fantastic creativity that was increasing with age. Rather than many people, as they get older, they get settled on one specific way of doing things. In his case, every single project was unique to be started from scratch. So he had wonderful, unique ideas.
There are several documentaries about John Lautner. One that comes to mind is called Infinite Space.
Yes.
Where you can see the Arango house in some brilliant photography and video.
Oh, yes.
Tell our listeners, I know it's hard to describe this house because it's so organic, but can you give a few words in general about what they would see if they drove up to it?
Well, if they drove up to it, they would see the roof of the house. It sits on a very steep lot that overlooks the Acapulco Bay. So it slopes down from the street. There is a winding driveway that takes you from the street down onto the upper floor of the house, which is open but covered space facing the Acapulco Bay, the infinite view, really. So that was the living, dining, and kitchen area. And the bedrooms were in the lower floor sheltered, much more sheltered than the upper floor, which at one point we considered enclosing with frameless glass, but the owner loved it just the way it was. So his decision was to leave it open. And this beautiful overflowing pool, which we called the railing pool, which went all around the upper floor, was meant to overflow into a gutter and recirculate in such a way that you could only see the Acapulco Bay as the main body of water after this railing pool.
Like an infinity pool.
Which contributed to this image of infinite space.
It's really astounding. Is it still in the same family?
Yes. The original owners are living there, so full-time. They didn't used to stay there full-time, but at this time it's a little harder to get people to visit.
Sure. Now, Robin, you were involved with the restoration of the Harvey House along with Helena. Tell us what the Harvey House looks like. It's a very different Lautner than Arango.
Well, Arango is the first of his, Silvertop is the first of his pretty exotic, super extremely exotic. And really, I was thinking about it while you guys were talking. There is really nothing like Arango. Even the later Lautners, especially like the Malibu Castle that Helena was super integral in. And I got to work on that one and got to experience doing that super exotic concrete work. The Arango is truly unique to its own. And it's probably, I don't know, I'm partial to the Malibu Castle, but it's been argued that the Arango is probably the greatest of the Lautners, and in some ways it truly is, because you can't compare it to any of the other ones at all. The Harvey is different in that it's wood frame and stucco and steel. There is some steel beams in it, but it's mostly all wood glue lam beam and glass, and it's a big circular room.
And when we say big, how big are we talking? Because I've been there, and it's big.
It's about 8,000 feet.
8,000 square feet living room.
Yes, close to it. The Harvey, correct.
It's like a big circular ballroom.
Yes, it's like a big ballroom. They call that the lobby, that when you enter, you come in the two new front doors, and you walk into a huge circular room that's probably a good almost 3,000 square feet, maybe even more by itself. It's very large. And then off of that, there's a kitchen wing and a dining room wing and an office, and then there's a big bedroom wing. And it's a great house. It's the first of the big Lautners, but it's about the closest Lautner ever got to doing an international style, and similar in the respect of, like Frank Lloyd Wright, they said Falling Water was similar to the international style that was going on in the 30s and 40s in Europe. The Harvey has some very streamlined, modern features that are probably driven by Harvey, because Harvey had his aluminum company and he could make any part he wanted. Oh, that's one thing about the Harvey House. All the aluminum products, and there's tons of custom machining they did. The doors and the windows were all custom made by the Harvey Company, and you've never seen anything like them. They are basically the granddaddies to the modern-day Fleetwood aluminum sliding doors. It's like the Fleetwood Company saw the Harvey doors and decided, wow, we need to make those. Because the Harvey product is just to die for. In fact, we had to get one made, and it was really hard getting one duplicated.
Does this company exist anymore, or is it out of business?
Harvey?
Yeah.
It's now called Harvey Titanium.
Oh.
And they're a big military contractor, I believe. They always were. Harvey Aluminum was big with military also.
Each of Lautner's designs is what it is because of the setting, the location, and the client. So as every person is different and has different lifestyles and requirements, that turns into a unique design. So there's no way an Arango house would fit in a Harvey lot.
No, it was very much a product of the site.
What I know firsthand, because I would go with John Lautner to his first interviews with a client, and I would sit and take notes of what each one said. The fact that he interviewed the client in great detail, asking about his likes and dislikes, his lifestyle, everything. And he did use all these elements, plus, of course, the site, the views, and the orientation to create a totally unique design. And he was always striving for timeless. He did not like concept of styles. He thought that styles are suitable only to fashion, to clothes, but not to buildings that would last many, many years. And certainly he did not want to have his buildings dated. So I think this uniqueness was really wonderful, admirable.
John Lautner's last project was called by many names. It was the Malibu Cliff House, the Concrete Contemporary, the Pacific Coast House, the Levy House, the Concrete Castle. It was finished up around 1990 in Malibu.
That's right.
And this was a client that had pretty much no limit on the budget. So you had quite an incredible house. Tell us about that.
Yes, well, there wasn't a budget set. He wanted something different that nobody else would have. And here is an example. During this original interview of Lautner with this client, he stated that he disliked any simple, recognizable geometric form. So please, I don't want any squares or triangles or circles in my house. But he liked curves, flowing, undulating shapes.
Wow.
So, as a result of that, you choose the material, which is concrete in this case, that can be molded into any shape you want, and free form. That house is really free form, and it is curving and undulating just like the client wanted.
As far as I can tell, there's never been any tours of that house.
Well, there are very serious privacy issues. The owner does not want the attention. He noticed during construction, as it was getting finished, there were buses with tourists stopping in front of his house and people getting in and looking at everything. So that really annoyed him, and he decided to try and make his house invisible. And in fact, there's very little that you can see from the street or the highway in this case.
Can you see it from the water?
Only maybe if you are on a boat far away with the telescoping.
Wow.
But again, it's never the same as being able to visit it. And the only people who are allowed to visit it are people who could be clients of mine.
Okay.
He's really, the owner has been great to me, but he does not allow anybody and no cameras at the site at all. So the only exception he made after me basically begging him was for a book published by Alan Weintraub and Alan Hess.
Oh, yes.
Where the house is featured there. It's the only place where the house is really featured with the owner's authorization.
Okay. I want to talk about another person, John Delaveau, who just died recently at the age of 106.
Wow.
John, like Robin, was a master builder, worked with Lautner on a variety of projects, and was able to uniquely take some of these designs, which were not easy, and help put them in place with their original intention. Robin, tell us about John and what he meant to you.
Well, I was very fortunate to where Mr. Lautner, he introduced me to John De Laveau and also to Wally Niewiadomski, his two premier builders that really built all the greatest Lautner buildings were either built by John De Laveau or by Wally Niewiadomski. And John De Laveau for the wood frame buildings and Wally for the concrete. And I was fortunate to where Mr. Lautner knew I needed more experience. Mr. Lautner offered me the Siegel House. That's the first home he offered me to build.
That's in Malibu?
Yes. And I had only known him several months, and he had given me several jobs to do, and I had done those, and they were repair jobs. And after the few repair jobs I did for him, he offered me the Siegel House. And the Siegel House, when I looked at those plans, it was this very interesting, bittersweet. It was the best day of my life and the worst day of my life, all rolled into one, where I was so proud to be going down to his office to look at those plans. I looked at those plans, and it was like I saw this monster grow right in front of me. It was so out of my league at that point. But see, that's because I needed to get trained, and that's what Mr. Lautner saw. I looked at those plans for an hour, and after an hour, with tears in my eyes, I had to tell him, I'm sorry, Mr. Lautner, I'm not ready for this yet. It's over my skill level to build this house. And he looked at me with it was a pretty amazing look he gave me, because he knew how hard it was for me to tell him that. I'm telling you, I pretty much would have rather chopped off my left hand than tell him that. But, hey, I was working for my hero. I had dreamt about working for this man for years, and now I was finally doing it, and I had to tell him no, and that was the worst. But he knew it.
Okay.
So he told me, don't worry, there'll be more, and I'll make sure that you're ready for the next one. So within a week or two, he hooked me up with John De Laveau, and next thing I knew is I was working for John De Laveau on the Stevens House and learning some amazing tricks. Mr. De Laveau, oh my gosh. That was like going for your doctor's degree working for him. He's the smartest. He was equally as smart as John Lautner, and he was the practical side of the team. Mr. Lautner devised it, and John De Laveau built it, and John De Laveau could literally, he was just like Wally. They could build anything. Nothing scared them. That was their greatest tool in their toolbox, was they were fearless about construction. And Mr. De Laveau, the greatest carpenter I ever saw, the greatest carpenter probably that ever lived, because he had Einstein smarts. He was that smart, and he was a craftsman tradesman. And where he learned from his father-in-law, a man by the name of Mr. Bell. I don't remember his first name, but John De Laveau said Mr. Bell was the greatest carpenter that ever lived. And so that's where John De Laveau learned all his great tricks. Oh, then John De Laveau went and learned shipbuilding for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's what set John De Laveau apart from all the other builders Mr. Lautner had. Was John De Laveau did a formal apprenticeship in construction and was a journeyman builder on homes for 10 years, and then left home construction in the early 30s to go work on yachts. So from like 1931, 32, he worked strictly on yachts till the beginning of World War II. And then during World War II, he got hired by a company that had a top-secret project with the Navy to take a standard PT boat, was the smallest fighting boat the Navy had, as an interim boat while they rebuilt the fleet that got destroyed in the sneak attack in Pearl Harbor. He evidently owned the company that had the top-secret project with the military. They hot-rodded this PT boat. So that's what he did during the war. And then right after World War II, he met John Lautner. Mr. Lautner's wife and Mrs. De Laveau, they met at a PTA meeting. Earlier you said to Helena, how did Mr. Lautner get his work? He was not the promoter at all, just like she said, but he had a couple of real aces in the hole. One was Elizabeth Lautner. She was responsible for introducing John Lautner and John De Laveau. Elizabeth Lautner also introduced me to John Lautner, so she was pretty instrumental to both John DeLaveau and me for us both meeting John Lautner, which is pretty amazing.
Helena, I have a question for you. I have read various accounts of John Lautner's association with the 1984 Olympics. At one point, I read he was the official architect of the Olympics, and then I read he was a juror in the competition for the Gateway Arch of the Olympics. Help me sort this out. What was his role with the 1984 Olympics exactly?
I really don't recall that. I was already working on the Concrete Castle project, and I was spending most of my days actually there at the site. So somehow, if it happened, it went by me.
Can I interject on that?
Sure.
I've done my own research on that a little bit.
Yes.
If you go on the internet, there's a lot of pictures and stuff they'll say is one thing, but it's really not. I think that's erroneous info. I've read all that same info that you're talking about. It's documented that he was supposedly an architect, but there's no record of anything. There's no designs. He didn't draw anything. He did nothing.
Well, I think he was on a jury. We found an article in the LA Times that said sculptors Claire Falkenstein, Frank Gehry, Raymond Cappy, and John Lautner were all jurors in the international competition for a Gateway Arch for the 1984 Olympic Games, according to Bill Kreisel, who was coordinator of the competition for the LA chapter of the AIA. So there's at least that much.
Thank you, Cindy Stratton.
Yes. Drawings of the arch?
Yes.
You have?
No. I don't have drawings of the arch.
No, or have you ever seen them?
No, I have not.
Yeah, okay. Me neither.
No, I haven't either.
But evidently he was on the jury for that. We'll have to look that up. We'll get Cindy to do that.
Definitely, that's one of the weird deals in his, when you read over his bibliography of things that he did in his life, that thing is interesting because it sticks out like, hey, that's wild. And then you go looking for it and there's no record of it other than it's documented, but you can't find any drawings or.
And that's so weird because 1984 wasn't that long ago.
No. Part of me thinks it's a bragging right kind of deal. Like somebody's bragging. They're using his name. His name is huge. And it's, like you said, it's bigger now than it ever was.
I just want to thank you both for being on the program. Helena, I just want to recognize you as well. There's been articles in the press the last couple of years about how Denise Scott Brown never got a lot of attention in relation to her husband, Robert Venturi. Your name comes up over and over and over again as I dig down into behind the scenes of John Lautner. I just really want to acknowledge how great an architect you are, and the contributions that you've made to modern architecture over time are just amazing. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Not to forget that I've been working for another 24 years after John Lautner's passing, and I was privileged to have his referral and recommendation originally to fantastic clients, every one of whom wanted something completely original and one of a kind for his own project. So I have a huge debt of gratitude to John Lautner for that, because definitely it helped me get fantastic work in many parts of the States and overseas as well.
You can still hire Helena to design your house.
Yeah, and me to build it.
And Robin to build it. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, this was awesome.
Thanks for listening. US Modernist Radio is underwritten by Angela Roll, your special agent for Modernist Houses. 919-995-0550. Okay, Tom, take us out.
Visit USModernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows and access 2.2 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. US Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Cindy Stratton, not her real name, has entered the witness protection program and now researches guests from a completely different coffee shop. US Modernist Radio is a production of Triangle Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational organization for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. George and I will be back in 2 weeks with another well-built, tightly designed edition of US Modernist Radio.